I'm Halftime Howie, and we're thrilled to start a new segment tonight. It's called Attention on Addictions. And I met Michael O'Neill at the wake of Brock Weisenberg, and I want to hold it up. Brock was a cousin, an extremely close friend of Michael O'Neill's, Harvey Weisenberg's grandson, beloved member of the community, passed away, 31 years old. And I spoke to Michael, and I heard at the wake, I heard Michael speak from the heart. I heard Harvey speak from the heart. And I said, this is overdue in our community. Addictions is such a prevalent problem that we need to raise awareness each and every week. And if we can help people who are suffering from addictions, then we're doing the right thing. So with that, Michael, I'm so happy to join us, and from your perspective, talk about your memories of Brock, but also about addictions and dealing with it in today's society.
Thank you, Howie. I just want to take a second to thank you, and I know you're doing a lot. You've been doing it a long time, trying to raise awareness for all different topics all over Long Beach, and that means a lot. He's got Harvey on here, obviously, seasoned veteran. But just even looking at the photo, this is the first time I'm actually seeing this in the Herald. And I got to say something about my cousin is that, growing up, you hear drug addict, you think someone on the corner, someone that you don't know, that's struggling, and it looks like something it's not. And the whole addiction to pain medication is where it started. And that's just the truth. And growing up with my cousin, I just want to be real frank here, is this is a kid that no one would expect. I mean, this is a kid that you go into the room and the room lights up. He's sitting at one lunch table, he moves to the other, and all the kids go to the other. Just a magnet of love, right? It didn't matter who you were, what your problems were, what your disabilities were. Brock always tried to go to the heart. It was right through the mind to the heart, and he touched a lot of people. Even through his addiction, and I was there with him when we went to the rooms of our Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous. He always wanted to help people, and that's something I want to keep alive, because Howie, I lost my best friend a year prior to this. Best friend, and that one rocked me hard. And I tried my best, and me and Brock, we spoke, and I just know that Brock would want me to do everything I can to help other people, right? His story speaks of itself. Everyone in Long Beach knew my cousin. Everyone in Long Beach knows Harvey. So it makes it a lot harder when you deal with something like this, because this is something that every family deals with one way or another. And it's something that attention needs to be brought to, because it doesn't have to come to this. And there's tools out there for people, to try to help overcome this horrible, you could call it a pandemic, you could call it an epidemic, but it's breaking hearts, and it's affecting a lot of lives. And I think it's just time to talk about it, to talk about addiction, to talk about, if you know someone that's going through addiction, so you can get out there and you can talk to people on how to approach this person, because I struggled with addiction myself, and it's something that's very important to me, is to be able to let people know that there's someone that they can go, someone they can listen to, someone they can talk to, that can help them start to turn it around, and then momentum builds from there. So if I could just end on one thing, I would say that my cousin Brock had a profound impact on my life, and it's hard for me even to come up with the words to describe him, because he's just an indescribable person. So I will say that love is ultimately what I think is going to help you reunite these families and overcome this addiction. So that's what I'll say for now.
And what I got from being at the wake and hearing people speak from the heart is that Brock had a special relationship with his grandpa, Harvey, and was so proud of the difference Harvey was making in the community. And talk about that relationship from your perspective, what a special place Brock and Harvey had with each other.
Well, I can say this, it starts growing up when we were kids. We would always say that at everyone you see, Harv comes up and he gives you a big kiss on the head. He grabs your neck and kisses you on the head. And we used to call him the Harv. That's what we used to always say, the Harv, the Harv, the Harv. And growing up, Harv was always there, always supported Brock. Anything and everything he could. Harvey's always, trying to help a lot of people, but I know Harvey had a sore spot in his heart for Brock. I know that just based upon the relationship I've had with Brock, and I've heard the things Brock say. But even through active addiction, Brock always spoke highly of Harvey. I'm going to meet Harvey for lunch. You know, Harvey just came in. Or did you see that thing Harvey's doing with the clock? Even recently, Harvey's trying to, you know, raise awareness towards the clock in Long Beach and how that should be fixed. And Brock shared the status. I mean, what is Brock getting out of that, right? Other than seeing that his grandfather's trying to raise awareness of something, and Brock wants to help. He just attached himself to the person or to the cause with the utmost of unconditional love. And me and Harvey were just speaking in the room when we were eating before. We spoke a little bit about unconditional love and what it means to love somebody with special needs. And you know, I think that's very important because there's a lot of walls that you could hit, you know, frustrations you could have. And just like going through someone with active addiction, it's a disease. I don't care what anyone says, it's a disease, and it's something that, like I said in the beginning, that love can only overcome. So when I seen Brock and he spoke about Harvey, highly of Harvey, it made me happy because it gave Brock something to look forward to. It gave him something to strive towards, even if it's just helping his grandfather. That in itself was enough for Brock. And I know Harvey has some stories about, you know, different people that he introduced to Brock and how Brock always wanted to help. But again, if I could just touch on that, it would just be Harvey was always a guy that was always doing something good for someone. And we were in the family, and we always wanted to, you know, do the best that we could to share that. And Brock always spoke very highly of Harvey. And I could tell that this is, you know, this was very tough for the family, especially Harvey, because I know there was a special spot in Harvey's heart for Brock and in Brock's heart for Harvey. So that's what I have to say about that.
Michael, thank you so much for sharing, and Harvey, let's get your thoughts as well.
Well, the guard was good because 3 hours before Brock left, we had a conversation because I called him, because I always called him frequently and asked him to have lunch and spent some time together because I know that he was in pain. He was suffering, he had this addiction, and Michael, you're so correct in saying it's a disease. It is a disease, but it's also an epidemic that is taking so many young people and devastating so many families that we really have to address the problem. The consequences are so severe. But getting back to my conversation with Brock 3 hours prior to him moving on, I had the ability to be able to tell him how much I loved him and how many people loved him. And when he told me that he loved me, and I just said, you know, there's nothing stronger in this world than just showing your love, especially if you have a situation that is very difficult. Because when something takes over your mind and your body, that it's, you're fighting a war against time, and you have to be strong enough to be able to oversee and overcome the pain that you're suffering. The most important thing you can do with somebody with a disease, you can give them love and support, or you can give them denial and just not doing what could be beneficial to that person. But you know, when somebody is involved with drugs, and as Michael defined before, it's not that guy in the street who's a dirty guy standing out there selling drugs and doing drugs. No, it's middle class and upper class. I mean, it used to be a situation in the low-income areas, that's where drugs were. Now, in the highest levels of society, it's a problem. It's a problem in this country, and it's devastating our country. Over a couple of 100,000 people have died from this addiction that's out there. And it's kind of upsetting to me to think that government can't do more about it. But when I watch the television program and the drug enforcement agents were going after the people who are producing these drugs and selling them, like if you have a small community with 30,000 people and they sold 500,000 pills to somebody in that community, you know something's happening. So when the DEA went in to get them, and Congress stopped them. Congress stopped them. So what are we talking about? Power and money. Nobody cares about the people. And what's government's most important effort? Quality of life and decency and respect for people and their lives. So government has failed in doing what it could do. Law enforcement is in trouble because they don't get supported. Being a former police officer myself, and I'm telling you, every cop, it's something that we have. We have the ability to pull somebody who overdosed and save their life. It's going to be a piece of equipment. As a police officer, you carry a pistol, a whistle, a nightstick, and now you're going to be able to have a way to save another person's life, because that's how prevalent it is. And I heard stories just recently of people, a lady in a car stopped, the police were there, somebody overdosed, and from her car she took out the necessary medicine to bring him back. And I'm saying she saved somebody's life, but look what's happening in our society. Education, very important. And it's very interesting, being a former principal in an elementary school in East Meadow. We wrote a song and had a program, and it was called "The Choice for Me is Drug-Free." Now we had 900 kids in the school, and I would get on the microphone in the morning and say, "What do Bowling Green kids say?" And everybody in the school would say, "The choice for me is drug-free." And Congressman Ray McGrath was there at the time, and he said he couldn't believe it. But the reality is, you got to go down to the lowest level and make people aware. But as I said, and I want to emphasize, the feeling I have, the love that I have, I'm not mourning Brock. I celebrate the 31 years of happiness and love that I got from him. And I just wish that, and I hope that people will understand the consequences, that you have to give love and support. Don't criticize, lock them out, deny them access, because the most important thing they can get from you, their family and friends, is the love that you can give to them, to give them hope. Thank you.
If I could just expand on what Harvey just said, he said a lot of important things in a very short period of time, but especially how he spoke about the low-income families just where the drug use was prevalent. And he also spoke about big business, which is also very important, and that's where I think government's making the biggest mistakes because of business interests. But the bottom line is Brock is not a kid who would go out and pick smack up in the street. Brock was not that kind of person. Brock didn't even smoke marijuana. Brock was very athletic. Brock was the life of the party, the guy that made you laugh, the guy that made you feel good. So you never would associate a death at 31 years old because of that at any point in his life 10 years prior to his drug addiction. So what I'm trying to say is the medication is where it begins. People think it's okay to take pills. They're taking pills from a young age, ADHD, ADD, whatever it is. At the end of the day, when they stop being able to get that medication, there's a physical dependence to that drug. And that's where choices get made, and Harvey made another very good point about blocking out. Because parents and brothers and sisters and cousins sometimes don't know what to do. They don't know how to speak to it. They don't have an active addiction. They don't understand it. So what do? They block them out. And what does that do? Isolation leads to less and less mental clarity, which only lets the drug take more and more control of the person. Until ultimately, the sad thing happens where you see a beautiful picture of a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful human being on the front of a newspaper that shouldn't be there. And the only way that we can stop this as a community is to raise awareness, number one, and get organized, number two. Because there's no reason why these people should be floating around in and out of hospitals, in and out of Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, in and out of, inside and outside of jails and institutions when they continue to suffer from the same root cause. And ultimately, Harvey is right. Love is the only thing that is going to fix this problem. And I just want to say one last thing about Brock is that Brock in himself had that desire to help, that desire to heal. And sometimes Brock, it was so easy for Brock to give love, almost naturally like the light shines. But to receive that love was the most difficult thing for Brock to do because he felt there was a lot of expectation attached to it. So I just want to make sure that unconditional love is extremely important. If you're suffering with someone, you're suffering yourself, or you know someone that's suffering, just try to give patience, try to give space, try to listen, because sometimes that's all it is.
Final point, Michael, I want you to expand on this point. And that is, if you're suffering with addiction, or you know someone suffering from an addiction, how important and vital is it to reach out and get help, or to convince that person you know that's suffering to reach out and get help?
Well, the first things first is the person has to know that the lines of communication work both ways. That's number one, because sometimes people going through active addiction are not going to pick up the phone to speak to somebody. So if you constantly call that person, they'll eventually pick up, and then the hope is that you can get through to them. I want to be very clear here is that sometimes the only way to help these people is to give them the space to help themselves. So making sure they have Narcan, number one, is extremely important. Most people will go right to the root cause. They shouldn't be taking the drug to begin with, and that's wrong. Obviously, we know that, but that's still going to take place. So Narcan is a must-have for anyone going through active addiction because nobody needs to die from this. If they stay alive, there's a chance they could beat it, there's a chance they could fight, and no drug addict that I've ever met wants to be a drug addict. That's number one. Number two is that you have to get organized with community. You have to get involved, because a body in motion stays in motion, and body at rest stays in rest. The last 5 months of my cousin's life were extremely difficult for him as he continued to isolate, and as more and more people continued to cut him off. He felt more and more isolated, and I did the best I could to let him know that I respect the life that you choose to live. Because if that's the way you want to go, and that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. But I knew in my heart, and he knew in his heart, that's not what he wanted. He wanted more for himself, which is why he promoted Harvey, which is why he went out to lunch with Harvey, even when he was disappointed in himself. And he knew he had the unconditional love with Harvey, but he was still very disappointed in himself, and he couldn't overcome that. And no matter what Harvey did, or what anybody does, you have to provide that space. And I would be very, very, very adamant to point out that if someone is going through active addiction, you can try everything you want to cure that person, but you must accept the reality and get Narcan, because that can save a life. That saved a lot of lives, and a lot of people sometimes they need to suffer enough before they come back. They need to hit a bottom, and sometimes that bottom, it's a pit it's an endless pit, and with the fentanyl and everything going around, it's not worth it. So all we can do as people who love people struggling from addiction or struggling for addiction ourselves is, number one, to accept, and number two is to monitor, to know how much you're using, to know when you're using it, regardless of whether or not you have a plan to stop. All you have to do is lower the dose, and you can clear the mind to allow the heart to make a heart-to-heart connection, and that is why the rooms works. That is why these programs work when people work them, because there's unconditional love and there's no ego in those rooms. That's why most of them take place in churches. So at the end of the day, I would strongly advise to accept the reality, to have the precautions in the case of a worst case scenario so that you don't have to suffer like all these people suffer, and then most importantly, to allow the space and the love to heal and let time do its thing.
Wow. I want to thank Michael O'Neill for sharing. I want to thank Harvey Weisenberg for sharing. And we will always remember Brock Weisenberg and pay homage to his memory and his impact while he was here. And Michael and Harvey, I want to thank you. And from the bottom of my heart, not only am I thrilled that you're now part of our family, but I believe deep in my heart that this segment on addictions is not going to save a life, it's going to save lives. Because social media is huge. And the more people see this segment, Long Island and all over the world, this segment with Michael O'Neill, Harvey, is going to save lives. And that's the bottom line.